It was the final day of Spirit Week at Clearwater High School, and the students were buzzing with excitement. Posters flapped in the hallway breeze, lockers were plastered with glitter and slogans, and music thumped faintly from a Bluetooth speaker someone had hidden in a backpack. Spirit Week had always been a way for students to break free, if only briefly, from the rigid rules that ruled the rest of their school year. The theme for the final day was Rebel Day, a nod to youthful expression, creative rebellion, and harmless mischief. It was meant to be a celebration, a way to end the week on a high note before diving back into midterms and standardized test prep. For most students, Rebel Day meant mismatched socks, temporary tattoos, or maybe colored contact lenses. For Lily Siegel, it meant blue streaks in her hair. Lily wasn't your typical rebel. She didn't smoke behind the bleachers or cut class to hang out at the gas station down the block. She was, by most accounts, a model student. Her GPA was solid, her attendance flawless, and her disciplinary record spotless. But she was also the daughter of Steven Siegel, the martial arts legend turned Hollywood actor turned international diplomat. Growing up in the shadow of such a larger-than-life figure gave Lily a complex relationship with rules. She didn't go out of her way to break them, but she also didn't see the point in following them blindly. If there was a logical reason behind a policy, she respected it. If not, she asked questions. And asking questions at Clearwater High often made you a target. Principal Gerald Hardgrave had been at Clearwater High for 15 years. A former Army major turned educator, he ran the school like a military base. Rules were not suggestions, and leniency was weakness. Dress codes were enforced with ruthless precision. Hair color was supposed to remain within natural human tones. Lily's streaks, though temporary and non-permanent dye, were deemed a direct violation. At 8:13 a.m., just minutes after first period began, she was summoned to the principal's office by way of the intercom. Her classmates fell silent. Everyone knew that tone in the secretary's voice. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Lily walked to the front office with her head held high. She'd expected a slap on the wrist, maybe even a detention slip. What she didn't expect was the sight of Principal Hardgrave standing beside the school nurse and Assistant Principal Keene, all three of them waiting like a tribunal. On the principal's desk sat a set of electric hair clippers, plugged in, and humming softly. "Miss Siegel," Hardgrave said, motioning for her to sit. "We have a serious issue." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Because of the hair?" "You know the rules," he replied sharply. "Unnatural hair colors are prohibited by the handbook. You will remove the dye or face suspension. It's temporary, it washes out, and it's Spirit Week. Isn't the whole point to dress differently?" "That does not include policy violations," he snapped. "You can either accept a 2-week suspension or allow us to remove the colored portion immediately." She blinked. "You want to cut my hair? We'll trim only the dyed sections. A reasonable compromise." Lily stood. "That's not reasonable. That's insane." Hardgrave looked at the nurse. "Please remain here in case she becomes uncooperative." The nurse looked uncomfortable but nodded. Assistant Principal Keene avoided Lily's gaze. The clippers hummed. "Call." "My dad," Lily said finally. "I'm not agreeing to anything until you call him." "That's not necessary," Hardgrave said. "This is a school matter." She backed toward the door. "Then I'm leaving." Hardgrave moved faster than she expected. He grabbed her wrist, not hard but firm enough to freeze her. The nurse gasped. Keene looked away. "Sit down." "You can't touch me," she whispered, voice shaking. "You can't do this. You're defying a direct order. This is your last chance." Lily sat. They shaved the left side of her head. When she walked out of the office, clutching her backpack like a shield, she didn't say a word. But someone down the hall took out their phone. The video only lasted 15 seconds. Lily, walking. Down the hallway, one side of her head shaved clean, tears in her eyes, her mouth set in a hard line. It spread like wildfire. By lunch, it had been viewed over 400,000 times. At 1:36 p.m., Lily turned off her phone. She didn't need to read the comments to know what people were saying. She went to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and sat on the closed toilet lid. It didn't matter who her dad was. It didn't matter what she said. No one had stopped him, but someone was about to. At 2:01 p.m., a black SUV with bulletproof windows pulled up to the front of Clearwater High. The driver didn't park. He idled, and then Steven Siegel stepped out, wearing black leather boots and a long coat that reached his calves. He walked with slow, measured confidence. No one approached him. The receptionist saw him through the glass and simply buzzed the door open without asking. Steven Siegel entered the front office, and Clearwater High would never be the same again. At exactly 2:01 p.m., as the Florida sun cast long shadows across the front lawn of Clearwater High, the school's mundane afternoon routine was shattered by the arrival of a sleek black SUV. The vehicle pulled up without fanfare or screeching tires, but its presence was immediately felt. Ominous, deliberate, and unmistakably significant. It didn't park like a visitor. It idled like an enforcer. Steven Siegel stepped out slowly as if time itself had decided to pause and observe. His long black coat fluttered around his boots, his expression unreadable behind his dark-tinted glasses. Despite the balmy heat, not a bead of sweat marked his brow. He moved with the quiet, practiced grace of someone who had trained both mind and body to remain still until the moment required motion. And that moment had arrived. Students who had been loitering near the windows saw him first. A gasp passed through the hallways as the recognition set in. Whispers erupted. Steven Siegel. Steven Siegel. He was more than a celebrity. He was a myth, a living avatar of cinematic justice. Teachers peeked through classroom blinds. Even hardened skeptics stood up straighter, aware that something serious was about to unfold. In the front office, the receptionist watched the cameras. She didn't ask for ID. She buzzed the door open. Something in his walk, in his presence, told her this was not a man who waited to be invited. Principal Hardgrave was in his office, reviewing disciplinary reports and glancing occasionally at the flurry of messages appearing on his screen. The school district's PR office had already reached out. News of the incident had spread far beyond local parents. A clip of Lily, her head half-shaved, tears in her eyes, had become a trending topic under the hashtag #JusticeForLily. Parents were calling, journalists were emailing, and the school board was requesting an urgent meeting. Hardgrave didn't flinch. His mind was steel, or so he told himself. When the door opened and Steven Siegel stepped in, the air in the office changed. It became heavier, thick with unspoken judgment. Hardgrave stood up slowly, as if unwilling to show even the hint of surprise or intimidation. "Mr. Siegel," he said, his voice firm but just slightly breathless. "I understand you're here about Lily." Steven didn't respond immediately. He looked around the office, letting the silence stretch just enough to make the principal uncomfortable. His eyes, hidden behind the lenses, seemed to see everything. The military commendations on the wall, the handbook on the desk, the buzzing clippers next to the paperweight. Without a word, he closed the door behind him and walked forward until he was standing directly across from Hardgrave's desk. "You laid hands on my daughter," Siegel said at last. His voice was deep, measured, with a quiet menace that made the temperature seem to drop several degrees. Hardgrave bristled. "She broke the rules. The handbook doesn't allow you to put your hands on a student. The handbook doesn't permit forced haircuts. What you did wasn't discipline. It was humiliation. It was within my authority." Steven raised one hand slowly. Hardgrave went silent. "I'm not here to argue," Siegel continued. "I'm here to inform you. You're going to apologize to my daughter, in front of the staff, in front of the school, if need be. And then you're going to resign. Quietly. Before this becomes something you can't recover from." The principal's mouth worked silently for a moment, like a man struggling to remember how to form words. "You're threatening me." "No," Steven said. "I'm giving you a way out." Hardgrave sat down. He suddenly looked older, smaller. Outside the office, the hallway was electric with rumors. Word spread like oxygen through fire. Steven Siegel was in the building. By the time he left the office, students lined the walls. Phones were out, recording, live streaming, capturing every step of the silent procession. Siegel walked down the hall, his eyes never leaving the end of the corridor. When he reached the counselor's office, he knocked once. Lily was inside, sitting on a couch with her hoodie pulled up. The counselor had offered her a soda and silence, which she had accepted without protest. She looked up when the door opened and saw her father. For a long second, neither of them spoke. He walked over and sat beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't run into his arms. She just leaned against him, the way she had when she was 6 and they used to watch cartoons before school. He put an arm around her. "Did he hurt you?" he asked. "Not really, not physically. Just, I didn't think they'd do it. I thought they were bluffing." He nodded slowly. "They underestimated you, and they underestimated me." She gave him a small, tired smile. "You really came? You're my daughter." That was enough. Within the hour, the school board called an emergency session. Seagal's presence had already caused a minor media frenzy. Several parents had pulled their children out of class early. Protesters gathered outside, some holding homemade signs, others simply demanding accountability. Hardgrave, facing pressure from above, agreed to a temporary leave. He would not return. By the end of the day, Clearwater High had changed. Students walked a little taller. Staff spoke more cautiously. And Lily, still processing the emotional fallout, walked out beside her father as cameras clicked and microphones chased them down the steps. Stephen paused, faced the crowd, and made one short statement. No child should be punished for expressing who they are. And no adult should abuse power under the guise of discipline. This isn't about hair dye. It's about dignity. He turned, opened the SUV door, and helped Lily inside. The vehicle pulled away slowly, leaving behind a school, a town, and a nation forced to reckon with what had happened, and that was only the beginning. The events of that Friday afternoon would ripple far beyond the quiet suburbs of Clearwater, Florida. What had begun as a seemingly minor infraction, a school enforcing its appearance policy, had transformed into a public relations nightmare, a national debate, and a lightning rod for broader questions about authority, student rights, and abuse of power. Steven Seagal's statement on the steps of the school, clipped and circulated across every major social platform, had become a viral moment of gravitas. Commentators across the ideological spectrum dissected every word. Students rallied under the banner of Justice for Lily, and talk shows scheduled entire segments to analyze what they dubbed the Clearwater incident. Overnight, Lily Seagal went from a quiet high school junior with a creative streak to an unwilling symbol of youthful resistance. She didn't want the attention. Her phone buzzed constantly with friend requests, messages, interview requests, and strangers sharing their own horror stories of school overreach. She tried to hide away, pulling the shades in her room, curling up under blankets, and listening to music to drown it out. But her father knew what was coming, and he prepared for it like a man entering battle, not with fists, but with facts. Steven Seagal was not new to navigating systems designed to protect their own. He'd worked as a reserve deputy, collaborated with governments, and had more than enough experience maneuvering through legal gray zones. He knew the school's apology, the principal's suspension, and the temporary changes weren't enough. They were stalling tactics. They were hoping the headlines would fade, but he had no intention of letting this go, because this wasn't about fame or pride. This was about his daughter's dignity. On Monday morning, while Lily stayed home to recover, Stephen walked into a law firm in downtown Tampa. The firm specialized in educational law and civil liberties. He met with attorney Michelle Dorn, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a reputation for dismantling school boards that overstepped. She reviewed the footage, the school handbook, Lily's academic record, and the statements made by Principal Hardgrave. Her conclusion was clear. "You have grounds for a civil suit," she said. "And if the nurse corroborates your daughter's claim that physical force was used, we're also talking about potential criminal charges." Stephen didn't flinch. "Let's begin." The following days were a whirlwind of paperwork, statements, interviews, and legal preparation. Michelle Dorn sent formal letters to the Clearwater School Board, the superintendent, and the district's legal counsel. She demanded immediate disciplinary action against all staff involved, a public apology, policy reform, and reparations for emotional damages. In response, the district issued a carefully worded press release acknowledging an unfortunate incident and promising an internal review. Stephen wasn't impressed, so he escalated. He partnered with a documentary filmmaker, a quiet young man named Elliot who had previously covered juvenile justice reform. Together, they planned to create a short-form expose titled Shaved Power and Punishment in American Schools. They filmed interviews with Lily, with other students who had been subjected to overreach, and even with teachers who, anonymously, voiced concerns about Hardgrave's authoritarian methods. Stephen provided narration, his voice calm and low, lending gravitas to the harrowing testimonies. The film was edited within 4 days and premiered online. It exploded. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed 11 million times. News anchors debated it. School districts across the country suddenly reviewed their disciplinary protocols. Civil rights organizations voiced support. Protesters gathered outside the district office, and Clearwater High became a national symbol of institutional failure. Inside the school, the atmosphere shifted. Teachers began to second-guess the rules they once enforced blindly. The faculty room buzzed with nervous conversations. Students, emboldened, began to question dress codes, homework policies, and even seating charts. For the first time, Clearwater felt like a place where young voices mattered, but the backlash wasn't one-sided. Hardgrave, though suspended, retained legal representation. His lawyers went on morning talk shows, painting him as a victim of cancel culture. He was enforcing policy, they argued. He was trying to maintain order. The real danger is mob justice. Some conservative commentators echoed the sentiment, claiming the incident was being blown out of proportion. Stephen didn't take the bait. He knew better than to engage in shouting matches. Instead, he let the facts speak. He released the school's INSIA handbook, highlighting the vague, outdated policies. He released a timeline of events, showing how quickly the school tried to bury the issue. He spoke at educational panels, calm and controlled, always bringing the conversation back to the students. Lily, meanwhile, found herself at the center of a movement she didn't ask to lead. Students from other schools reached out with stories, artwork, and messages of solidarity. One girl from Chicago sent her a sketch of Lily with a half-shaved head, standing on a mountain of outdated rule books, raising a flag that read, "Respect us." Lily cried when she saw it. With her father's help, she turned her room into a mini art studio. Canvases replaced posters. She started painting again, expressing the things she couldn't say aloud. Her most striking piece was a portrait of her own face, one side whole, the other fractured like shattered glass, the background a swirl of school colors bleeding into gray. As lawsuits progressed, the district finally relented. They placed Hardgrave on indefinite leave and voted to review the student conduct code with input from parents and students. But Stephen wasn't done. He scheduled a town hall meeting at the local civic center. It was standing room only. Parents, teachers, students, activists, all gathered to discuss not just Lily's case, but a larger cultural reckoning. A panel was formed, made up of students and parents, to recommend policy changes. Local lawmakers attended. Cameras rolled. Stephen. Siegel stood at the podium, his daughter seated nearby. He wore his black coat, his glasses, and his expression was solemn. "We're not here to destroy institutions," he said. "We're here to rebuild them, with compassion, with accountability, with the understanding that rules mean nothing if they serve only those in power." The crowd erupted in applause. And as Stephen stepped down, Lily rose and took his hand. They weren't done fighting, not yet. But for the first time, it felt like they were winning. By the time spring rolled into Florida with its warm breezes and pollen-laced winds, the echoes of the Clearwater incident had reached the halls of the state capitol. What began as a conflict between a high school principal and a defiant student had evolved into a battleground for educational reform, freedom of expression, and the limitations of authority. Every major news outlet had touched on the story. Lily Siegel's artwork had been featured in Teen Vogue and The Atlantic. And Stephen Siegel, once known solely for action films and stoic one-liners, had become an unlikely icon of parental advocacy and institutional accountability. But fame was never the goal. Justice was. The lawsuit against the Clearwater School District had officially gone to court. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered daily, broadcasting updates as the nation watched a school policy manual be dissected like an ancient manuscript. Legal experts debated in real time on air. Witnesses took the stand, including students, teachers, and parents who had long felt stifled by the school's rigid and often arbitrary codes. And finally, after weeks of testimony, Principal Hardgrave himself took the stand. He was thinner now, his once commanding voice subdued. The national attention had not been kind to him. Under questioning, he attempted to defend his actions, insisting he had only done what was necessary to uphold discipline and consistency. But cracks formed quickly. Emails were presented that revealed conversations with staff about making an example of Lily. A text message to an assistant principal reading, "We'll show her who's in charge," became damning. By the time he stepped down from the stand, murmurs filled the courtroom. Steven Siegel was in attendance every day. He didn't sit in the front row, nor did he seek the cameras. He simply watched, his arms folded, his eyes fixed forward. When it was Lily's turn to speak, he stood behind her, silent, a presence of support so solid it seemed to anchor the room. Lily walked to the stand slowly, her new hair now dyed blue at the tips, a quiet symbol of self-reclamation. "Why did you dye your hair?" the school board's attorney asked. Lily looked him in the eye. "Because I wanted to feel like myself again. Not just someone following the rules so closely I forgot who I was." "Do you think rules don't matter?" She hesitated only a moment. "I think rules that don't protect students shouldn't exist." Her words spread online within the hour. The trial ended with the court ruling in Lily's favor. The school district was found liable for emotional distress, unlawful discipline, and failure to follow due process. A settlement was reached, though the amount was kept confidential. More importantly, the judge ordered a mandatory review of disciplinary policies across all schools in the county. The ruling sent shockwaves through educational systems nationwide. Administrators began revisiting policies on appearance, student expression, and corporal authority. But Stephen and Lily weren't done. They used part of the settlement to create the Seagull Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to helping students and parents fight back against unfair school policies. The organization offered legal advice, mental health resources, and a platform for young people to share their experiences. Lily, though still introverted by nature, recorded video messages and gave occasional interviews, always grounded in authenticity. "I'm not a hero," she often said. "I just spoke up when I couldn't stay silent anymore." Meanwhile, Hardgrave disappeared from public life. The state revoked his administrative credentials. Rumors surfaced of a book deal or a podcast, but nothing came of it. His name faded, but the consequences of his actions remained etched in the legacy of reform. Months passed, and the media's attention turned elsewhere. But at Clearwater High, things were different. Students now had a voice in disciplinary committee meetings. A student-led dress code panel was formed. Teachers received training on trauma-informed discipline. A mural in the cafeteria, painted by Lily and her peers, read, "We are more than rules." In late May, during the final school assembly before summer, the new principal, a younger woman named Maribel Cross who had worked in student equity programs, invited Lily to speak. The auditorium buzzed as she took the stage. She didn't say much, just enough. "I used to think power was something you had to take, but it's something you build, with others, with truth, with courage. Thank you for standing with me." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, she stepped outside into the warm sunlight. Her father was waiting near the parking lot, leaning against the SUV like he always did. She walked toward him, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her smile wide and real. "You ready to go home, superstar?" Stephen asked. She laughed. "I'm ready for a break." He opened the passenger door. "You earned it." As they pulled away from the school one final time, the quiet hum of possibility settled between them. The fight had been brutal, the spotlight blinding, but they had endured. Together. And far beyond Clearwater, in schools and cities across America, a new question was being asked in hallways and homes. Are we protecting students, or just controlling them? Thanks to a girl who dyed her hair, and a father who stood beside her, the answer would never be the same again.